So yesterday, we began the sugi of Kiddush HaShem and how we derive that in regard to three different isurim, or three different averos, the halacha is yehareg val yavar. That was the discussion that we had yesterday on Daf Ayin Daled Amid Aleph. We started with Rab Shimon ben Yehud Tzadok, and he was the one who says that Avodah Zarah, like the other two, Gilui Arayos and Shvichas Damim, does not lend itself to V'chai Bohem, and therefore one is obligated to give up his life in order to avoid Avodah Zarah. The Gemara then brought a dissenting opinion, according to which we do not require Yehareg val Yavar in the case of Avodah Zarah, except Rabbi Shmuel agrees that although Bitzina, if it's not in the public eye, then you would violate Avodah Zarah to save your life. V'chai b'hem would apply, but not if it's in public. Because b'far Hesya, we have halacha of lo sechalu Hashem kodshi v'nikdashti. And that teaches us that Avodah Zarah b'far Hesya requires Kiddush Hashem. That was the shita of Rabbi Shmuel. And the Gemara here quotes the Brisa of Rabbi Lazar, according to which, in all three cases, even in Avodah Zarah, one is required to give up his life. And that's derived from V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol me'odecha. And that commands us, or let's say enjoins us from worshiping an idol of Avodah Zarah, even at the pain of death. So that drasha here in the Brisa, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, would support the original, if I can use the word congregation, a group of scholars who were together in a place called Aliyas Beis Nitziza in Lud, and they classified Avodah Zarah together with Gilui Arayos and Shvichas Damim as Yehareg val Yavar. The drasha for Avodah Zarah is this pasuk V'ahavta, because the opposite of Avas Hashem is Avodah Zarah. Then we had a discussion about why it has to say Bechol Nafshecha and Bechol Modecha. Why do we need both of them? And we say that there are two types of people, and you can categorize them as either Chaviv Alei Nafsham or Chaviv Alei Mamodam. So you need Modecha and Nafshecha. Then we had a very long and complicated drasha from which we derived the Yehareg val Yavar in the case of Gilui Arayos, which is called Nara Murasa. And there we came to the conclusion that Nara Murasa, as far as Yehareg val Yavar, is a derivation from Rotzeach. Because in the parsha of Nara Murasa, the Torah created an equation to Ritzicha. And Ritzicha is Yehareg val Yavar. The Gemara asks the question, how do we know that in Ritzicha there's a din of Yehareg val Yavar and there's no V'chai Bohem? And the Gemara answers, because of a svar. In this case of Ritzicha, we don't need any sort of source in the Torah, but rather we apply the principle of my chazis, the dama didach tfei, dilma dama de chavrech sumak tfei. And that's where pretty much we got up to yesterday. Okay, seem to have misplaced my notes here, but that's okay. He also Rav Dimi. Let's just make sure we have the place. Is there a shortcut here? To Kiyasa Rav Dimi. Yeah, 4 lines up from the bottom. Yeah, we have it. 4 lines up from the bottom. Yeah. Kiyasa Rav Dimi. So that means that Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, and he was one of 2 Amoraim that brought the tradition and transmitted the words of the Rebbe in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Yochanan. So according to his tradition, Rav Dimi, Omar Rav Yochanan said in Eretz Yisrael, he taught us that Lo Shanu Ella Shalo B'Shas Gzeres Malchus. When we say that you apply the exact flip principle, namely of Yavar V'al Yehareg, in all 610, and therefore you violate rather than give up your life, that only applies Shalo B'Shas Gzeres Malchus. Aval B'Shas Gzeres Malchus, Afilu Mitzvah Kala Yehareg V'al Yavar. So that means the following. I mean, here you have to add 2 very crucial words here, and that's afilu bitzina. That if it's a shas hashmad or shas gzeres malchus, when the kingship has prohibited any sort of Jewish practice, that's shmad, then no matter what mitzvah it is, it doesn't have to be the cardinal 3 mitzvahs, averos that we spoke about. Any mitzvah in the Torah, you would have to give up your life, even bitzina. That is the Shita Rav Dimi in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Now Rashi adds a few words here. Let's see if we can find the Rashi. Yeah, the last line in the page. Shlo yagilo or lo yagilu ha'ovdei kochavim lahamrich es halavavos lekach. Now, I'm not sure of the exact translation of the word lahamrich. But what I think it is kind of like subjugation. And what it means is that if the Goyim see that they can force a Jew to violate his religion because the Jew is going to submit to that threat, then the Goyim are going to keep doing this over and over again. It's like a cinch. There's no challenge here. If they realize the Jews will refuse, and even at the pain of death, they will not violate their Torah, their religion, then the Goyim have to make a decision whether they want to just, destroy the whole Jewish community. An easier thing for them would be if they see that by pressuring the Jews will succumb to that pressure, and they will agree to violate the Torah. So what's really at stake here is, in a sense, the entire future of the loyalty of the Jews to the Torah is at stake, because once the Goyim get used to just softening the Jews or pressuring the Jews to violate the Torah, then eventually the Jews will chas v'shalom not be observant of the Torah. So we can't let the Goy get used to pressuring the Jew and threatening at the pain of death that if the Jew doesn't violate his Torah, they'll destroy him. So we can't let that go on. And therefore, according to this tradition of Rav Dimi, Yeharg val Yavar b'shas hashman, even b'tzina, on any of the 613. Kiyasa Ravin. However, Ravin was the other Tana who was in charge of the transmission of Rabbi Yochanan's Torah from Eretz Yisrael to bring it to Bavel. And he has a different tradition. Omar Rabbi Yochanan, I heard from Rabbi Yochanan, Afilu shelo b'shas gzeres malchus. Forget about gzeres malchus. Rabbi Yochanan was making a point that you would have to give up your life al Kiddush HaShem for any one of the 613, even if it's not Shas Hashmat. Norvas. Lo amru ela b'tzina. When we say Yavar al Yeharg, that's only b'tzina. Avol b'farhesya, any mitzvah will generate an obligation of Yeharg val Yavar, of Kiddush Hashem. Why? Because it's b'farhesya. Afilu al mitzvah kala, even if what? It's not one of the big three, any of the 613, Yeharg val Yavar. Now, before we go on, let's just try to figure out what Ravin would say about Rav Dimi. The truth is that at the face of it, there doesn't necessarily seem to be a battleground, meaning a situation in which Ravin and Rav Dimi would be at loggerheads. Why? Rav Dimi is talking about tzina, whereas Ravin is talking about farhesya. What would Ravin, the second opinion in the Gemara, say? What would be his view in a case of tzina? Would there be a possibility of Kiddush Hashem Yeharg val Yavar in a case of tzina? And the answer might be yes. That's Shas Hashmat or Shas Gzeres Malchus, as the Gemara formulates. And then you could ask the opposite question: what would Rav Dimi say about a case of farhesya? He doesn't address that question. So if we were to combine both of these shitos, lahalacha, then we would say that the only time that we apply the principle of Yavar v'al Yeharg in 610 is only if A, we're talking about B'tzina, and B, we're talking about Shalo B'shas Gzeres Malchus. But if any one of those would be flipped over, and you wouldn't have both conditions, then you'd have to give it your life. If it's B'tzina, but it's Shas Gzeres Malchus, then Rav Dimi would apply, you have to give up your life, Yeharg val Yavar. And if it's B'farhesya, Shalo B'shas Gzeres Malchus, then Ravin would kick in, and the farhesya itself is enough to be mechayev Yeharg val Yavar. So far, so good? I don't know, you look like you're spaced out over there.
So how did this apply during the Inquisition?
Well, again, the Inquisition is certainly b'farhesya. That's baptism in public. And it's also Shas Hashmat. You got in the Inquisition, you have two strikes against you. Meaning there are two reasons, each one independent of the other, that can be Mechayev Kiddush Hashem. One is that Shas Hashmad, no question about it. And number two, even if it wasn't Shas Hashmad, it's for our Hesed. But here it's both Shas Hashmad and for Hesed. Again, those Jews who went underground, so to speak, they call them the Moranos, that's a different story. The Rambam wrote a whole letter to try to encourage them to come back to the fold. But what I'd like to do is take a minute and bring you a Rambam, I have it right here, and see if the Rambam is going to accept both Rav Dimi and Ravin lahalocha. Okay, one second. So it's Perek Hey Mehilchas Yisodei HaTorah, and the Ram says, Kol Beis Yisrael mitzuvim al Kiddush Hashem HaGadol Hazeh. And the Ram says the following. If it's Achas Mikol Mitzvah Saburis B'Torah, and the Ovei Kochavim is Ma'anis Yisrael to violate one of the Mitzvah Torah, O Yargeno, or he'll kill him, Yavar Vial Yehari. And that's called V'chayvon. B'medvar Mamurim B'shar Mitzvos, Chutz Mi'avor Zora, Gili Arayis U'Shvichas Dom, Ol Shol Shaveris Halolu, Im Yomer Lo Avar Al Achas Me'emotei Horeg Yehorig Vel Yav. B'medvar Mamurim, when do we have this leniency of Yavar V'al Yehorig in 610? That's Bisman Shoved Kocham Miskavin Lanos Atz, etc., etc. Avol Miskavin La Viro Al Mitzvus Bilvad. But if the kavan of the guy is simply, he doesn't get any pleasure or benefit from the Jew's violation, he's just trying to get the Jew to violate his mitzvos. Im hoya beino vein atzmo, v'ein shoma sora mi Yisrael, yavro v'al yehoreg. V'im onsola viro basara mi Yisrael, in Farhesia, yarog v'al yavro, yehoreg v'al yavro. So far, the Rama has accepted the opinion of Ravin that we limit the heter of, or the application of Yavor Val Yehoreg to situations of Ptsina, which the Rambam calls Beino Levein Atzma, the Ein Shom Asor Yisrael. So that's Yavor Val Yehoreg. But if it's Bifnei Asor Yisrael, then Yehorig Val Yav. And that's Shar Mitzvahs. Oh. Then listen to the next round. V'chol advarim ha'elu lo shelo b'shas ha'gzera. Avo b'shas ha'gzera, v'hu sheyamod melech rosha ki Nebuchadnezzar v'chavera. V'yigzor gzera al Yisrael levatel dosam. O mitzvah min ha-mitzvahs, yehorig val yavar, afilu al achas mishar mitzvos, beinenas betoch asora, beinenas beino leveina aku. Clearly, the Rambam now accepts the opinion of Ravin. So the Rambam has both Rav Dimi and Ravin. The only chiddush that I see here in the Rambam that we didn't have on our own up until this point, because these are the Gemaras that we learned so far, is that there's a difference between this kavein lavira ala mitzvahs or miskavin lanos atzmo. What is the intention of the guy? What's his purpose? What's his gain? And the Rambam in that sense is qualifying or limiting Rav Dimi. Right? Rav Dimi was the one who said that b'far Hesya, afilu shelo b'shas kseres malchus, he has to give up his life. And the Rambam qualifies that and limits it. He says that in this Kaveh mitzvahs, im hoye beino levein atzmo, so he says, "Unso laviro be'asar miYisrael." That was the case of Rav Dimi, of Ravin. Sorry, Yehareg val Yavar, but only because he's miskavin laviro ala mitzvos. So the Rambam says that the halacha of Yavar v'al Yehareg that applies to 610 would apply if niskaven ha'akum lanos atzmo, and that presumably is an unqualified statement, and it would apply even before Hesed. So let's say, for example, Esther. If Esther was married to Mordechai, Achashverosh would be Gili Arayis, because she's a married woman, let's say. Again, I'm not going into all the details, but it's B'Farhesia. I mean, it doesn't mean that he had a relationship with her B'Farhesia out in the public necessarily, but everybody knew about it. I mean, he took her as his queen. So if it wouldn't be Gili Arayis, let's say if Mordechai was not married to Esther, then it would come under Shara Veris B'Far Hesia, and then the question is, since we're paskening like Ravin, that Shara Veris B'Far Hesia is Yehareg val Yavar, why didn't Esther give up her life? And the answer could be because Lo niskavin el lanos atzmo. I mean, Achashverosh didn't even know she was Jewish, so certainly he didn't have an intention of having her violate her Torah. That wasn't his motivation. Okay. Now, the Rambam goes on with a big Kiddush. What is the deal in a case of Yehareg val Yavar if he doesn't give up his life, like you mentioned in the Inquisition? So the Rambam writes the following. It's the very next halacha here, Perkei Halacha Daled, that we got up to. Kol mi shenemar bo Yavar ve'al Yehareg v'nerag v'lo ovar. Okay, so this is the opposite case. Harezim is chayav b'nafsho. Okay, that's a gigantic machlokas. Mitzvah Hashem b'lineda. We'll get to it. But this is what I wanted to get up. Kol mi shenemar bo Yehareg v'al Yavar v'nerag v'lo ovar harezim Kiddush Hashem. Fine, etc., etc. Kol mi shenemar bo Yehareg v'al Yavar v'ovar v'lo nerag Harei mechalas Hashem. Im hoye basar Yisrael harei yichilas Hashem barab. Ubito mitzvahs esay she kiddush Hashem. Vi overall mitzvahs losas esay he chil Hashem. Vi afal piche. Mipnei sha'ovar be'ones. Right, he was only motivated to violate the Torah to save his own skin. Ein malkin oso. The ein tzarich lomar she'ein memisin oso bezdin afilu harag biones. Whoa, this is really going far. They forced him to kill a Jew. Otherwise, we're going to kill you. And he killed a Jew. We're not going to be putting him to death, even though the Torah requires that he give up his life. The Torah has no leniency or license for him to kill someone. Nevertheless, afilu harag, even if he killed someone, it's still considered ones. It was not his free will decision, and therefore ein memisin oso best. He will not be put to death. Shein malkin umemisin el la'over b'rtsono u'b'yedim v'asro. All right, so I'm going to put the Rambam on the side for a minute. Now, let's go slowly. We said that V'chai Bohem teaches me V'lo Sheyomos Behem. That's the Heter Pikuach Nefesh. And that's Doche Kol Averes Shabbatorah. But we said that there are Gimel Averes Chamuros, and there's no V'chai Bohem. We also said that with regard to other Averes, Shar Averes, the other 610, if it's Shas Hashmad, Shas Gzeres Malchus, or even if it's Shalo B'Shas Hashmad, but it's B'far Hesya, then Yeharg Val Yav. Now, the question that we want to raise is, can we categorize two distinct and fundamentally different situations where the Torah, the halacha requires Yeharg Val Yav? One is Gimel Averos of Ritzicha, Gilui Arayis, and Avodah Zarah. That's one category. Then we have another category, and that's Shas Hashmad, and that's Far Hesya. And the question is, do we have V'chai Bohem? In the case of the Gimel Averos Chamuros, there's no V'chai Bohem. But when we get to the other Averos, there might be Kiddush Hashem and the Isur of Chil Hashem, where it's Far Hesya, Shas Hashmad, but there is V'chai Bohem. Right? They ask him to wear shatnez, I don't know, to eat non-kosher food, it will kill you. And it was for Far Hesya, he's got to give up his life. Or it was Shas Hashmad, even B'tzino, he has to give up his life. All that we saw. But he went ahead and violated the Torah law and did not give up his life. So what is he guilty of? Is he guilty, possibility number one, of violating the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem? But that's it. Or are we saying no? He's guilty of violating the Avera that he implemented. In other words, does V'chai Bohem still apply, but just after you apply V'chai Bohem, you have a mitzvah called V'nikdashti of Kiddush Hashem. And one could ostensibly argue that when you talk about Shar Averos, whether it be B'far Hesya or whether it be B'Shas Hashmad, you're not talking about an Avera per se, like he ate chalev and he's chayav for achilas chalev. No. V'chai b'hem, he saved his life. What he's guilty of is the bittul mitzvah aseh of v'nikdashti of Kiddush Hashem. Punish him for that. But in the case of the big three, as we call them, the cardinal sins, that's a different story. There's no v'chai b'hem. We're going to derive from psukim. All right, we'll have to see about Ritzicha, but we're going to derive from psukim. Like, for example, in Avodah Zarah, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol nafshecha, etc. That there's no v'chai b'hem. Forget about Kiddush Hashem. Let's say it's Shalom b'shas hashmad, there's no Gzeres Malchus, and it's B'tzina. But in these three cases, you're not allowed to violate the Torah. You have to give it your life. Yeharg vel yav. So if there's no v'chai b'hem, if there's nothing to override and trump the Isser Avera, there's no heter to violate the Avera, even if it means giving up your life. Because these three Averas are so chamuros, they rise above v'chai b'hem. Then if he violates any of those three Averos, he is liable, he is guilty of violating those Averos. There was no v'chai b'hem. So the Rambam is going to introduce another element, and that might be that he's onus. Okay, we'll have to see. But fundamentally, the Rambam would have said, if not for the element of onus, that he's guilty of violating that crime in the three Averos Chamuros. And the Rambam is certainly talking about the three Averos Chamuros because he says, Afilu harag biones. Now, the other possibility would be to say that whenever Kiddush Hashem applies, then Kiddush Hashem itself removes the v'chai b'hem. Until now, we've been assuming that it's the Chumras Havera that puts that Havera above human life. It's more important than v'chai b'hem in those three Averas. But in other Averas, v'chai b'hem elawot, there's a mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem barabim and b'shas hashman. But we could go in a different direction. We could suggest that the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, together with the Isser of Chil Hashem, takes away the v'chai b'hem. It neutralizes or vitiates the v'chai b'hem, even in Shar Averos. And that's the impression you get from the Rambam. The Rambam is the only mitigating element here in terms of Beis Din meting out a punishment in those cases of Yeharg val Yavar is onus. Okay, so the Rambam has, call it a technicality as to why we can't put him to death or we can't punish him for the crime that he committed. He was meant to give up his life and not violate the crime. But if not for the consideration of onus, then he should be punished with the full brunt of the law. And that might apply even in the cases of Shar Averos, whether it's B'far Hesi and Kiddush Hashem, whether it's Shas Hashman and it's Kiddush Hashem. And the Kiddush Hashem is telling me that there's no heter for these Averos. There's no matter of a chai b'hem. It just doesn't exist. It's off the map. Now, the Kesef Mishnah, here in Halacha Daled, quotes the Ramach, Rav Moshe Cohen, one of the late Rishonim. And he writes, Kol Misha Ovar V'lo Nerag, Bezdin Memisen. Bezdin is going to put him to death. And the impression you get here is that the Ramach is talking about all situations of Yeharg Valyav. Ovar V'lo Nerag, Bezdin Memisen. Comes along Rabbeinu David, a Talmud of the Ramban, Rabbeinu David, and he's quoted by the Ran. The Begimel Averos im Ovar V'lo Nerag Dinu Shenerag. In the three Averos Chamuros, where he was meant to give up his life, he didn't, and he violated any of the three, Nerag. Masha Enken, he says, B'shara Veros. Shas Hashmado B'farhesya. Im Ovar V'lo Nerag, Hu Potur. So it means that according to Rabbeinu David, as we suggested at the outset, there are two separate categories here. There's the Gimel Averos Chamuros, where there's no heter v'chai bohem, and therefore memisen also. And for some reason, Rabbi David rejects the Rambam's ones, that mitigating factor. And then there's another category of Kiddush HaShem, of Shar Averos. But there, the Torah says v'chai bohem. And the v'chai bohem is operative to remove the Avera. Eloi has a mitzvah of Kiddush HaShem. He has to give up his life because of that mitzvah. But the Aver per se is subject to the license, to the matir of a chayboin. And therefore, in those cases, according to Rabbeinu David, there's no punishment. It's pot. So let's summarize three possible shitos. There's the Ramach, quoted by the Kesef Mishnah. There's Rabbeinu David. And then there's the Rambam. The Rambam is going to say that in any case, even in the Gimel Averos Chamuros, where the din is Yeharig Val Yavar and he was Ovar V'lo Nerag, there's no punishment. Ain't Bezin Malkin also, V'ememisin also, period, nothing. The Ramach is going to differentiate. No, I'm sorry. The Rabbeinu David is going to differentiate. Rabbeinu David is going to say that for Gimel Averos Chamuros, Yeharig. But if it's Shar Averos B'Shmad or B'Farhesya, Potter. And the Ramach seems to assume that straight across the board, we're going to punish him and put him, well, punish him whatever punishment is appropriate. Even if we're only talking about Shar Averos with Kiddush HaShem. Now, a lot of what we've been discussing, and with this I want to wrap it up for today and for this week, is based on two concepts. One concept is called ones, and the other is called v'chai bohem, or pikuach nefesh. And we really logically should differentiate between the two. I mean, pikuach nefesh attacks the avera and is mata the avera itself under those circumstances where a person's life is in danger. Onus is a whole different story. Onus means that he acted out of coercion without his own individual ratzon, personal ratzon. And onus is a mitigating factor as far as onshim is concerned. We cannot punish a criminal for his crime unless he was totally free and deliberate, as opposed to onus. But onus has nothing to do with the avera per se. It's dafka pikuach nefesh and v'chai bohem that can be matter the avera. So that in Mitzvah Hashem will pick up weiter as we go along. I'll take this opportunity to thank you and wish you a great Shabbos. Thank you so much.